Right. Hello, everyone, and good morning. My name is Jeanette, and I am coming at you live from the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California. Today is June 10th, and it is 9 a.m. this morning. So if you are watching us on June 10th at 9 a.m., welcome. You're watching us live as well. Today, however, I am not alone. I am here with the help of Connolly and with Lourdes. And with their help, we're going to see a lot of wonderful images and media behind me on the screen. So they're going to be doing a lot of the behind the scenes work as we navigate through the world of our ocean life, but we are going to be also learning our ABCs along the way. So today is a lot about practicing realizing what the animals are, talking a little bit about what they do, and also thinking about our sounds today. So we're going to be looking at our alphabets. So, in order for us to interact with each other, if you are watching us live, we do have a chance for you guys to communicate with us and live chat with us. So, if you're watching us on June 10th at 9 a.m., you're more than welcome to text us live in the number below. It is 562 286 1838. You can text us any questions, any observations, anything you might be noticing along the way. Or if you are not watching us live, you can always watch us later on the same platform. And you can also email your questions to us if you're not watching us live. That is at live@lbaop.org. All right, my friends. So today we're going to venture through the world of our ocean life animals. So we're going to explore lots of different what we call habitats, and we're going to be learning a lot about their adaptations. So before we get started in doing that, I wanted us to give us a little bit of time to warm up our scientist brains. So in order for us to do that, I want you to take a look at the habitat behind me. So when we say habitat, we are talking about a home. So that is a home for any of our ocean animals. Some of the habitats under the ocean could look a lot like this. This is our tropical reef Pacific, all right, habitat behind me that we actually have here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. So I'm going to step off screen for a bit, but I want you to start thinking about what are some things you are noticing. So we're going to practice using our observation skill. So in order for us to do that, I'm going to step off screen and I want you to see what you are noticing. So are you noticing any colors maybe? If you are able to recognize any of the animals that you are seeing, you can also maybe send them into the chat or tell it to someone that might be next to you. You can also maybe notice some behaviors. For example, I see some that are swimming. You can also think about what makes up the habitat. For example, is it sandy? Is it rocky? Is it colorful? What are you seeing? I'll give you a few more seconds. We're getting lots of close-ups of our little fish here. All right. So I hope at this point you have at least noticed one thing that you might be seeing in our tropical reef habitat here. All right. So I want you to hold on to what you've just noticed because our observations tell us a lot about what's going on, believe it or not. So, for example, one thing I noticed is you might have seen someone that passed by here earlier that swam a little bit different than all of the other fishes. Did you see it? If you did see it, oh, right there, coming at you again. So, that is actually one of our sharks, right? So, that is our gray reef shark. If you notice, our gray reef sharks are going to swim a little bit different than our fish, right? That's because they have those stronger fins. So what we're just starting to notice is that all of these animals, even though they live in the same place, sometimes they have their own what we call adaptations. So an adaptation is kind of like the close up here, right? An adaptation is something that the animal has on their own bodies that helps them live and survive every single day in the habitat that they live in. For example, us as humans, we live on land. And since we are living on lands, we have things on the outside or the inside of our bodies that help us live and survive. For example, we have our lungs that help us breathe into this air that we have up on land. When in the opposite, lots of ocean animals have what we call gills. So that is their own unique adaptation to be able to survive and live underwater. So now that we learned a little bit about habitats, we learned a little bit about what an adaptation is, and we started noticing some adaptations from our tropical reef exhibit here in back of me. But today, I want us to focus on what other animals we can find. So, the way we're going to do this is we're going to be focusing on the alphabet to help us explore our ocean life, starting with the very first letter. So, today we're going to be focusing on the letter A. Let's see if Lourdes can find us an animal that starts with the letter A. So, here we have our anemone. Can you say anemone? So for our anemones, you might be noticing they look like kind of like flowers, right? With all of those little tiny petals or tentacles, right? Coming out of their body. If we focus on the shape of our anemone, it's very round, right? So for our anemones, we're going to be focusing on how they eat. So if you think about how they eat, anemones don't have fins like the fish or much like the sharks that we saw in our tropical reef exhibit, but the way they're able to catch their food is that they do it with their tentacles. So if you ever touched an anemone, you might be finding them on tide pools close to the beach. But if you ever touched an anemone, you might be noticing it's kind of sticky. So if you go out and touch one of those tentacles, it's kind of going to feel like the tape got stuck on your finger or if it's holding on to you. That's because that's what they do with their food. So when they have a little tiny creature swimming up and rubbing against it, it's going to go ahead and get stuck on its tentacles. When it has something in its tentacles, it's going to go ahead and take it to the middle section right here because that is actually the anemone's mouth. So when it has something really good to eat, it's found something, it's going to go ahead and close up those tentacles, kind of like a flower, and it's going to go ahead and start digesting it while it's closed. So that is how they actually eat. That is a very unique adaptation because they don't have teeth like we do. So they have to be able to eat their food in their own way. If we look at the body of the anemone down here, they actually have what we call a foot. So with their foot, they're able to hold on to surfaces like rocks. Because they're able to hold on, they live in tide pools. So that means that they are constantly being pushed by all of these waves. And since they're being pushed, they have to be able to hold on to stay safe. So we learned a little bit about our anemone friends and their sticky tentacles. We also learned how they eat. Let's see if we can find the next letter. So our next letter is now B. Let's see if Lourdes can find an animal. Oh, there we are, right? That starts with the letter B. So here we have our bat stars. So B is for bat stars. Do you know why we call it a star? Can you guess? That's right. It's because it has those 5 arms. If we were to count them, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those arms. And with those arms, they're able to also move. So the way they move on the bottom of the ocean floor is that they actually have little tiny tube feet. So the way it looks like is when they are moving with their 5 arms, they're going to do it flat on the bottom of the ocean floor and they're going to go ahead and slowly move with all of those little tiny feet on the bottom of their body. Another adaptation that our bat stars have is that they can be a little bit more sturdy or hard. Sometimes they could be a little bit spiky. So if you were to touch one of our bat stars, it's not going to be too squishy. Well, some of them are, but for the most part, they're going to hold their structure of their body. So if you were to touch one, it's going to be more than likely a little bit harder than you expect. That is because that is their own way of protecting themselves from maybe other predators or animals that might try to eat them. Another adaptation that we can talk about from our bat stars is the way they eat. So our sea stars actually do not have teeth like us, much like our anemone. But instead of catching their food by being sticky, having sticky tentacles like our anemones, they are going to go ahead and whenever they find something really good to eat, like a clam, they're going to hold on to it with their arms. They're going to pry it open. And then they're going to get that squishy inside. When they found a really good snack or opened a really good clam, they are going to go ahead and take it to the middle part of their bodies. So what we're looking at right here is the underside of that sea star. So if we were to grab a sea star and we were to flip it over, that is their bottom, right? So we're seeing their underside of that sea star. And in this close-up, we can actually see those little tiny toothy we were talking about earlier. But what I also want to point out is this middle section here. When you look at the underside area of a sea star, you might be able to see their stomachs or their mouths. So what happens when they get a really good clam that they want to snack on? They're going to go ahead and take their stomach out of their body. They're going to go ahead and pack their food or that yummy clam inside of that stomach, and they're going to go ahead and digest it outside of their bodies. Then when it's nice and full, it's going to go ahead and take their stomach back into their bodies. So that is a very unique way of eating. That's because that's their own adaptation. Like we said, they do not have teeth like we do. So they have to find a way to be able to manage and eat their food their own way. Really cool. So let's see if we could find our next letter on the ocean. So our next letter is actually C. Oh, Lourdes read my mind because she brought up one of my favorite ocean animals. You might be able to recognize it from a really cool movie that I saw when I was younger. But these are our clownfish. So, our clownfish friends, you might have noticed, they have a unique habitat. So, they're usually living in coral reefs as well, like the first habitat that we saw, but they're more than likely being found in what we call anemones that we saw earlier. So they like to live in anemones. So the way they are adapted to live in anemones, because what we talked about earlier, anemones could sting and they are also very sticky. So why do you think the clownfish is able to survive in a habitat that might be stinging and is very sticky? Well, our clownfish actually have a mucus layer covering their entire bodies. So they with that mucus layer, it protects them from maybe feeling the sting or getting stuck anywhere. And in return, our anemone is giving the clownfish a really great home. In return, the clownfish is able to clean up the anemone. Anemones could be very messy eaters sometimes. So, because of this, our clownfish actually like to eat up leftovers that the anemone leaves, therefore cleaning up, kind of like little vacuums. So, if we think about our clownfish and our anemones, they actually have a really good relationship because they help each other. Another really cool thing that it provides is it provides a really good habitat. And our clownfish have these really cool stripes. If you take a look, all of those white stripes. If we look closer, those white stripes actually camouflage to the tentacles of the anemone. So camouflage means they do a really good job at hiding because those stripes actually look like those tentacles. All right, my friends. So we now learned a little bit about the clownfish and its unique adaptations. So let's see if we can find our next letter in the ocean. Let's see what else we find. Our next letter is going to be D. Oh, this one's a little bit hard to see. Do you see something? Oh, that's a very good closer look. Oh, I think we're able to see some dolphins. So these are our dolphins that we can find locally here at the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach. If you were to take one of our whale watches, you're also able to see some of these guys. So these are our dolphins. So if we think about dolphins, our dolphins are looking a lot different than our bat stars or maybe even our anemones or our fish. That is because dolphins are actually what we call mammals. Do you know what a mammal is? Well, our mammals are just like us because we are actually mammals. So mammals actually have five things that are considered. If you think about an animal, they need five things to be considered a mammal, right? One of them is live birth. Another one is that they need to have hair, right? Are also able to breathe air, right? At some point of their life, they're able to, or they have to, drink milk or eat milk, like in the case of our dolphins. And they are also making sure that they are warm blooded. So they have a lot in common with us, excuse me, right? So if we think about our mammals, the way they breathe, if you've ever seen a dolphin breathe, is through what we call their blowhole. It is right up here. Let's see if I can, there we go. Right? So that is actually their own nose. So they have a really cool adaptation of having their nose or their blowhole on the dorsal or the top part of their bodies. That is because it is very easily to, it'll be very easy to come up and take a breath on top of the ocean floor if they have it there. That way they're not poking up their entire body in order to take deep breaths. Another cool adaptation that our mammals have is that they are also warm-blooded. So much like us, they're able to regulate the temperature of their body internally. So that means, for example, like us, if we spend a long time running outside, our body's going to start naturally sweating, right? That is because that is our body's way of cooling down. And on the opposite, if it's a very cold day, right? We also need to make sure we stay warm so our body might start shivering. That is because that is our body's own way of getting warm. So our body is able to do that on its own. Another unique adaptation is that they need to have hair. You might be looking at this dolphin and think, where is it going to have its hair? Well, at some point of the dolphin's life, for example, when they were babies and just born, they couldn't yet communicate with their moms. So in order for them to communicate with their moms, let's say they were very hungry or they need to be fed, right? They used to have little tiny whiskers on their body, right? When they are hungry, they're going to go ahead and rub against their mom to let them know with those whiskers to let them know that they are hungry. And that was their way of communicating when they were younger. Another reason, well, another adaptation from our dolphin is that they are also making sure that they are eating a lot. So, in order for them to catch food, they actually travel in pods. If we go back to that first video that we saw, we might be able to see that they don't really like traveling by themselves. Whenever they are migrating or traveling in order to stay safe or find the best source of food, they like to do it in pods. Sometimes, if you're out on our whale watches, you'll be finding pods up to the hundreds. Can you imagine seeing all of those beautiful dolphins all together? That would be a really great sighting to see. All right, my friends. So we now learned about our dolphins that we have here at the outside of our doors at the Aquarium of the Pacific. But let's see if we can further explore our next ocean friend. So the next letter is actually E. Let's see if we can find any ocean animals that start with the letter E. Oh, there we go. So I'm gonna step onto the side so you can see the full of our ocean animal. So this is what we call our epaulet sharks. So for our epaulet sharks, the way you're able to define if it's an epaulet shark or not is more than likely its size. It's a smaller variety of shark, but the way you're also able to describe it is because of this spot here. There we go. Right? So that spot is a really great indicator that you are now found an epaulet shark. You might be thinking where these ocean friends live. Well, they like to live in shallow water. So that means waters that isn't too deep. Although they can live in deeper situations, they like to live in more shallow waters. Sometimes you can even find them in tide pools. If you don't know what a tide pool is, if you ever go to your local beach and see some rocks just gathered together, sometimes our ocean waves gather water in these little tiny pools, and we call them tide pools. So sometimes you're able to find little baby epaulet sharks there too. That is because that is where they like to thrive. So if we take a closer look at our epaulet sharks, we might be able to see some shapes on them. For example, do you see all of these triangular shapes here? Right, we have another one all the way down there, and we have a smaller triangle over here, right? Those are its fins. If we'll take a closer look at its fins, there's one special fin that it has that unique to their adaptation and way of living. If we look at this one right here, right, you might be noticing it's a little bit curved. This is what we call their pectoral fins. So they have very strong, almost paddle-like pectoral fins. If you're thinking about a paddle, think about a paddle that's being pushed by, right? When you're pushing a boat, they had work very, very similarly. So they actually use these strong paddle-like pectoral fins to kind of appear like if they are walking sometimes. So they kind of push themselves much like a boat and kind of seem like they are walking by dragging the rest of their bodies. So the reason they do that is they are also able to get to between tide pool to tide pool. So they're able to move around. So they have a really great advantage because sometimes they're able to live in places that have very low oxygen. So because of the support of their paddle-like fins, they're able to navigate and control a lot of the food that they find in the tide pools. There are not a lot of animals that can survive in the tide pools, so epaulet sharks have less competition to getting food in tide pools, and that is why they like to thrive there. So our epaulet sharks are really great at adapting and living in tide pool situations. All right, my friends. So we now learned about our favorite friends, our epaulet sharks here. And now let's see if we can find our next letter in the ocean. So our next letter is actually F. Ooh, let me move to the side here. Do you see anything? It kind of looks like coral to me, but maybe if we take a closer look. Oh, I think I see an eye somewhere here, and maybe a mouth. Ooh, that means we have to see something. This is actually our frogfish. And the reason we were having such a hard time finding it, it's because they are masters in camouflage. So the reason that they are frogfish, it's because they actually like to hang out. So they're not oftentimes swimming. Although they can, they more than likely are to be found in corals, but they're also able to be found in rocky corals. So what they do is that they kind of hang out on top of rocks and they're able to camouflage just like this, right? So if we take a look at our frogfish, they're able to camouflage in rocky corals because their bodies look a lot like a rock or maybe like a little tiny rock covered in algae. So for our frogfish, they are actually made to wait around for their food. So they're not actively swimming or walking like our epaulet sharks, right? But they are able to hang out on these rocky corals. And when they found something, they're going to go ahead and pounce a little bit, kind of like a frog, right? And they're going to go ahead and eat a smaller variety of fish. So those tiny fish that they are eating, they actually do not have any teeth. You might be thinking, so how are they eating their food? Well, they are able to swallow it whole. So once they have any food that they found, they're going to go ahead and sneak attack and they're going to go ahead and swallow that food whole. Another way that they attract predators is if you take a closer look here, I'm going to step out the way, but this tiny little dot here kind of looks like a little string and a little dot, kind of a little bit of a lure, what we call it. So they're able to, with their lure, they're able to lure any sort of predator, right? You might be noticing maybe a fish will be curious. It's going to get a little bit closer. It's going to want to take a closer look, or it might think it's food. It's going to get a closer look, just close enough for our frogfish to be able to get it and eat it. So we've now learned about our frogfish. They remember they are masters of camouflage and luring their prey in order for them to eat. Let's see if we can find our next ocean friend. So our next letter is G. Let's see what else we find. Oh, I see a little friend. So if we look at our friend here, this is what we call our garden eel. So these garden eels are actually living in habitats that kind of have lots of seagrass in them. So because they are coming out just much like the seagrass grows upwards, our garden eels are also living the same way. So they're going to go ahead and find little homes on sandy bottoms. They're going to go ahead and poke only the top of their bodies out of them. This way, they camouflage with the surrounding seagrass. You might also notice that our eel is not only one color, right? It has a white body, but it has lots of little tiny spots. That is also their way of camouflaging. So, a lot of our ocean animals actually have this sort of same camouflage. We call it disruptive camouflage. So, in order for us to take a closer look, I want to point out these larger spots here. So if you look at these larger spots, you might be confused, right? Where would the eye be? Do you see the eye? Maybe the eye could be this one. Maybe it could be the top one right there, right? But their eye is actually all the way up here, right? So that actually also confuses predators. If you were to look at a garden eel, you would be very distracted by its spots, right? And you would also be confused if it were an animal or maybe a piece of seagrass. All right, my friends. So we learned a little bit about our garden eels today, but let's see if we could take a look back at all the wonderful animals we took a look at. So, if we go back to our tropical reef Pacific, we're going to go ahead and take a closer look. And now that we learned a lot about of the adaptations in our ocean life, we might be able to notice something different. So, while we get back to our tropical reef Pacific, one thing I wanted to also talk about is think about all of the variety of ocean friends that we have. So this is just one habitat that we took a closer look at, for example, our tropical reefs. But our animals are living all throughout the ocean floor in different habitats. Because they are different living in different habitats, that means that they all need their own unique adaptations to help them survive in their habitats. So as a review, let's think about all the animals we learned. So if we start with our letter A, right, we learned that A is for anemone. Those are our sticky friends that like to catch food with their tentacles and take it into the middle where their mouth is. B, we learned about our bat stars that have 5 of those arms. And we also learned about that middle section that is their mouth. And we learned about how they take their stomach out of their bodies to help digest. We learned a little bit about our next letter C, that is for our clownfish. We talked a little bit about how they're able to create a relationship with our anemones in the case where they both help each other. We also learned about D, our dolphins. We learned about how they travel in pods, and we also learned a little bit about what makes a mammal a mammal. We learned about the letter E, that is our epaulet sharks, and we learned about their fancy way of getting between tideful to tideful with their strong pectoral fins. And we learned about the letter F, which was for frogfish, who are masters of camouflaging. They're able to lure their prey and then pounce and eat them whole. We also learned about our next letter G, which makes our garden eels. And we talked a little bit about their disruptive camouflage, all of those little tiny spots that makes their predators very confused when they see, kind of not looking like an animal at all. All right, my friends, it was a very wonderful time, and I had very much fun exploring the ocean through our alphabets. Don't forget to keep on learning. And also, if at any point you're watching this later on, remember you can always email us your questions. If you're still wondering about any of the ocean animals we talked about, or have any questions about any ocean animals, you can always email us those questions later on, even though we're not live. All right, my friends. So that is all the time we have today. If you want to continue exploring with us today, we also have another Aquarium Online Academy at 10 a.m. today on June 10th. All right, my friends. Very great job today. It was very wonderful having all of you guys today. Don't forget to keep on exploring. Bye, everyone.